We are on part 2 of chapter 17, Configuring Security Policies. Let's now turn to customizing the event log. The event log records, as you know, logins, log-offs, file access, Active Directory modification. And a problem that we had here at one time, the Community College of Baltimore County, is we had a server which had no problems. So we never looked at the event log. And then one day this server started to get really slow, and then the hard disk was filled up. We couldn't figure out why the hard disk was filling up, and we looked at the event log. And we saw that the event log had gotten so big that it filled up the entire hard disk. So this required us to customize, or at least configure, the event log. To modify the event log, we go to the Computer Management Console under System Tools. Under System Tools, this is the security log. If I right-click on the security log and I select Properties, we can see here's the maximum log size, 131 meg. And the reason we have a maximum size is if you didn't have a maximum size, then eventually it would get so big it would completely fill up the hard disk. Now, we could select the first option that says overwrite events as needed, the oldest events first. So that way, once the log gets full, it doesn't just stop. The oldest events get overwritten first, and that's one way to go, but the disadvantage of that is important events can be overwritten. It kind of defeats the purpose of having an event log. So what we could do is we got to monitor it manually. What we could do is select this option that says do not overwrite events, because we don't want them to be overwritten. But the problem with this is that when the event log is totally full, then nobody can log on. So what we got to remember to do is check this event log periodically. We can increase the size of the event log, and we can make sure not to audit more stuff than we need to audit. If we select do not overwrite events, clear logs manually, we can archive the logs, which means save them to some other media, and then we can clear the logs manually. If you clear the log, you can save it and then clear it, and this clears out the log. Now you might say, well, what if a bad guy administrator creates some kind of computer crime and wants to cover his tracks? Well, if you clear the log, another entry is added showing who it was that cleared the event log. So typically before you clear the event log, you should typically save the data from the event log. Another thing you can do is increase the event log maximum size, so you don't have to check it so frequently. This can be done per computer, or of course it can be done domain-wide using group policy. What I can do is go into the security settings, under the event log, under maximum security log size, I could select that, and then we could increase the size of the log as big as we wanted, just not so big that it filled up the entire hard disk. Now let's discuss restricted groups. The reason we want to use restricted groups is to prevent users from being accidentally added to sensitive groups. You know how to add a user to the administrators group. You go to Active Directory users and computers. It's easy enough to do. Well, suppose we want to be really careful and not have just anybody added to the administrators group. To restrict who is going to be the administrators group, we do that in group policy. So let's go to the default domain controllers group policy object and select Edit. And under Security Settings, under Restricted Groups, we can see there are currently no restricted groups. I will right-click and select Add Group. I will give the group a name. I will click Browse, followed by Advanced, followed by Find Now, and I will select the group that I want to give access to. In this case, the administrators group. I click on OK, and OK, and OK. Now the question is, well, who do I want to be able to be in this group? So I will click on Add, followed by Browse, click on Advanced, select Find Now, and I will select the users who I want to be in the administrators group. I click on OK, OK, and OK, and now just these people can be in the administrators group. So this will prevent other people from being added to the administrators group in Active Directory users and computers. I mean, if they really want to add somebody to the administrators group, they could come back here, but this just prevents adding users to sensitive groups. It just makes it a little harder to add them to sensitive groups. And this is called restricted groups. Restricted groups prevents users from being added to sensitive groups, for example, the administrators group. Now let's discuss security templates. When we say server hardening, we mean tightening the security parameters to make it harder for bad guys to break in. And the way we do that is by implementing security templates. A security template is a set of pre-configured variables that are designed to tighten security. And then we use group policy to apply the security template to a large number of computers, so we don't have to walk up to all those computers to apply all those security parameters. So to create a security template, to create the template, you select, you create the template and then you configure the security parameters. To create the template, you open a Microsoft Management Console and then you add the template snap-in. To open a blank Microsoft Management Console, we go to the command prompt and type MMC. And that brings up a blank Microsoft Management Console. And then to add the snap-in, I click on File and I select Add Remove Snap-in. I scroll down and I select the snap-in I want to add, which is the security templates snap-in, followed by Add, followed by OK, and there is the security templates snap-in. To create a new template, which is just a collection of group policy security parameters, I click on New Template and I give the template a name, in this case, Workstation Template. So these are security parameters that I want applied to workstations, not domain controllers, to workstations. And I click on OK, and then I configure the parameters that I want to configure. For example, under the audit policy, I will enable object access auditing. Under the user rates assignment, I will give everyone the ability to load and unload device drivers. This is not domain controllers. This is just individual users' workstations, and I do want to give users the ability to load and unload device drivers on their own workstations, at least in this example. And then under security options, under interactive login, I will enable the option that says do not display last username. So that way, if you walk away from a computer, even if you log out, it will not display what your username is. And then under user account control behavior, I don't think we've talked about user account control, but under user account control, we will configure the security option to prompt for consent for user account control. We'll talk about that later. After we have created the security template, then we apply the security template. It can be applied, it's attached to a group policy object, and it can be applied to the entire domain or just to an individual organizational unit. In this example, I will apply it just to one organizational unit. I'll go to Organizational Unit 3. I'm in my Group Policy Management console here. Organization Unit 3, right-click, select Create a Group Policy Object in this domain, and I will call the Group Policy Object just GPO3, followed by OK. Then I right-click, and I edit that object, and then under Policies, under Security Settings, I right-click and I select Import Policy. And when I select Import Policy, it applies all of those security parameters that we previously configured. I click on Policy, I select Workstation Template, followed by Open, and then that applies those set of parameters to the computers in this organizational unit. Security templates. A security template is a set of pre-configured variables designed to tighten security, and you use group policy. You use group policy to apply the templates to an organizational unit or to the entire domain. Maintaining and optimizing group policy. Group policy refresh means that when you make a change to group policy, those changes will apply to domain controllers within 2 minutes, and they will not apply to workstations and member servers for another 90 minutes. This is called group policy refresh. So every 90 minutes, the workstations and other servers, not domain controllers, check with the domain controller to see if there have been any changes in group policy. Every 9 minutes, group policy refresh. Why would we want to change the group policy update interval? If we increase the update interval, then that will reduce network traffic. So if we are in an environment where the network traffic is really high and we want to do something to try to reduce the amount of network traffic consumption, then one thing we can do is we can increase the update interval. The default is 90 minutes for workstations. So we go to the Group Policy Management Editor, and under System, under Group Policy, we select Group Policy Refresh Interval for computers, not for domain controllers, but just for non-domain controllers, meaning workstations and servers. And the default is 90 minutes. So what I can do is I can change that to 180 minutes. Notice the description says, this policy setting specifies how often group policy for computers is updated while the computers are in use. So if I increase that, if I double that number from 90 minutes to 180 minutes, then that will reduce network traffic utilization by a little bit. Notice I'm not going to do it on my domain controllers. Those are really important. I'm not going to change that variable. So they'll refresh every 180 minutes. Now, what if I just can't wait? What if I've made a group policy change and I just have to have it applied to this computer immediately? GP update command is used to apply group policy right now. If we type GP update space / target : computer space target : user, it'll update user group policy configuration variables. If we type / target : computer, it'll just update the computer configuration variables. And if you want to do both of them, you just go to the command prompt and you just type GP update. I type GP update, I press the enter key, and the workstation's got to go over the wire and connect to the domain controller. And if there's a lot of traffic on the network, this is just going to make it even worse. And then it says that the computer policy update has completed successfully and the user policy update has completed successfully. GP update. So by default, it's every 90 minutes for the workstations. You can increase it to 180 minutes, but to make it happen right now, you use GP update. Optimizing group policy. To optimize group policy, you can disable unnecessary group policies. Because remember, when group policies go over the wire, that causes network traffic and slows everybody down. So if we disable unnecessary group policies, then that will increase performance. Here's the example. We want to disable the user group policy parameters because the only thing we're really concerned about in this example is to configure the computers. So here's what we do. I go into my group policy management console, and to see all of my group policies together, I go into the container that says group policy objects. And if I go to my default domain controller's policy, I right click on that and look at GPO status, what I can do is I can disable the user configuration settings. I can enable, I can disable the user configuration settings. And if I do that by disabling unused group policy object settings, then what that will do is increase the speed of processing. Now let's discuss configuring local users and computers. And this will be for servers which are not part of a domain. Let's look at creating users and groups, and we can create users and groups using the computer management console or using the control panel app. So let's go to computer management. I right click on users and I select new user. I give the new user a name, first name and a last name. I assign him a password and I confirm the password. And I click on create, and now you can see we have created a new local user, not a domain user. This is not Active Directory. This is created on the database of users on the local computer, and they call that database of users the SAM, the Security Account Manager. To create a group, I can go to Groups, right click, and select New Group. I will call the group Temporary Accountants, for example. Click on Add, and then add a user or group of users to that group, and I click on OK, and this allows me to create a local group. And then we can also use Control Panel to create users and groups. So let's look at Control Panel. It's a lot like Windows 7. In fact, let me demo it on Windows 7. To go to Control Panel, you press the Windows key, and there's Control Panel. Click on Control Panel, and then I select User Accounts, and under User Accounts, I want to create a user account, but I have to click on Manage Another Account. I click on Manage Another Account, and then now here I can select Add a User Account. I click on Add User Account, and I type the user's name, such as Bill, and notice the user's name and the user's login name are necessarily the same thing, because this is just the local database of users on this individual computer. This is not Active Directory. It's just this local computer, and I give them a password, and I re-enter the password, and I add a password hint. The user has been added, and I click on Finish, and the new user has now been created. Let's now discuss user account control, and I'm sure you're familiar with user account control. User account control is where you're doing something in Windows 7, some sort of an administrative task, maybe not working on a Microsoft Word document, but like creating a user or deleting a user or formatting a partition or installing new software. And you get this message that pops up that says, do you want to continue? And sometimes this can be a little annoying when you're installing a lot of software. It's constantly asking, are you sure? Do you really want to do this? And the reason that we have user account control is to protect rogue programs. Those are bad guy programs from running on your computer. So if a rogue program is running on your computer, meaning a program that's come down from the internet, and that program is trying to delete users or wipe your disk, when a program or when a user tries to do an administrative task, such as delete a user or wipe a disk or install a program, then the user is prompted. When the user is prompted, that says, do you want to install this program? And if you're installing the program yourself, you say, well, sure I do. But if a prompt comes up and says, do you want to do this? Do you want to install this program? And you don't know what they're talking about, then you click on no. So the whole purpose of the user account control is to prevent rogue programs from running on your computer. To configure user account control, you can do it per computer or you can do it domain-wide. So let's look at doing it on a Windows 7 computer. Go to Control Panel, and under User Accounts and Family Safety, under User Accounts, we select the option that says Change User Account Control Settings. If I select that, we can see at its most secure setting, this is a little slider bar right here. When it's at the top setting, it says, always notify me when programs try to install software or make changes to my computer, or when I try to make changes to Windows settings. And I really don't want that one. So what I will do is I'll slide the slider bar down. And if we select this option, it says notify me only when programs try to make changes to my computer, but don't notify me when I'm making changes to my computer because I don't need to be notified. I'm doing it myself. Or you could slide down to never notify at all. User account control can be configured per computer. We can also configure it domain-wide using group policy. Now, when we configure user account control domain-wide using group policy, what we're doing is we're configuring the behavior of user account control for the administrator, for members of the administrator's group, and for regular users. So to make that modification, we go into the default domain controller policy under the security settings, under security options, and we select the option that says user account control administrative approval mode for the built-in administrator, and it says not defined. So if I right click and select properties and I select enable, well, back up. Right now, user account control is not even turned on for the administrator. So if we do want to turn it on for the administrator, we select properties and we enable it. And when the administrator tries to perform an administrative task, the administrator is prompted, and the administrator then clicks on OK to continue. And that configures the built-in administrator account, the administrator. Now we can also configure for members of the administrator's group, which is slightly different. So to configure the user account control for members of the administrator's group, I right-click and I select Properties. And we can select Prompt for Credentials or Prompt for Consent. Now, credentials means you got to type in your username and password. And the person is already a member of the administrator's group, so we're not going to make them do that. We're just going to select for Prompt for Consent. And Prompt for Consent just means you have to click on OK when user account control tells you that a significant action is going to be performed on this system. OK. Now, how about for the standard users? To configure how user account control works for standard users, we right-click and we select Properties. And when we enable it, keep in mind standard users don't have the authority to perform administrative tasks. So in order to do that, then they have to provide the credentials of somebody who does, a member of the administrator's group. So we're going to configure user account control for standard users for prompt for credentials. So if the average user tries to do something that only the administrator should be able to do, the user is prompted, and then the user can type in the name of the administrator and administrator's password. That's prompt for credentials. So members of the administrator's group is prompt for consent, and standard users is prompt for credentials. User account control allows us to configure the behavior of user account control in group policy for the administrator, for members of the administrator's group, and for standard users. Chapter 17, Summary. In this chapter, we discussed auditing and enabling auditing and specifying what files or objects will be audited. We looked at Event Viewer, at rights, at built-in groups, and at security options. We looked at restricted groups, security templates, optimizing group policy, GP update, managing local users and groups, and configuring user account control. And this concludes Chapter 17. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.